What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with that video. I finished 129 drafts so far this offseason, so I figured we'd take a look at the 5 running backs that I have drafted the most and talk about why I've drafted so much of them. These exposures are obviously from Underdog, since I, of course, have not joined 129 redraft leagues. I'm not that crazy, but the vast majority of these are $25 paid leagues. So I think it's valuable to see who I'm taking against people who are paying money to be in the league, even if Underdog ADPs are slightly different than Redraft. And I want to be very, very clear, even if these were Redraft leagues and not Underdog, I would be targeting the exact same players. So even though it's from Underdog, I still love and will be targeting these players in Redraft. So my single most drafted running back is Derrick Henry. I've drafted him in 26 of my 129 leagues. That is just over 20%. People's main concern with Derrick Henry are threefold. 1, his age. 2, Lamar's going to steal rushing touchdowns. 3, the lack of reception. So let's just take these one by one, talk about these 3. Easiest one for me to throw away is the Lamar concern. Lamar had only 5 carries from inside the 5-yard line last season. That was the same as Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert. He had 1 more carry from inside the 5 than Trevor Lawrence, Jake Browning, Gardner Minshew. He also only has 10 rushing touchdowns over the last 3 years combined. So Lamar truly is not that big of a threat to Derrick Henry's rushing touchdown ceiling. Baltimore running back scored 20 touchdowns last season. And if you look at the only competition for Derrick Henry when they get inside the red zone, it's a sub 200-pound Justice Hill. He's got 6 total touchdowns in 4 years. We know what Justice Hill is. He is not someone they're going to use in the red zone. And then the other backup, Keaton Mitchell, is under 180 pounds, coming off a torn ACL, and will not be ready for the start of the season. So no touchdown concerns. You have to completely throw away anyone giving a notion that Lamar Jackson is somehow like a threat to a 20 touchdown ceiling for Derrick Henry. The one that you should legitimately be concerned with, and I am, is the reception ceiling. We know who Derrick Henry is as a player. We know this offense for running backs. We know without a shadow of a doubt, he is not going to have a spike season for receptions. But if we look at even what happened last season, right? Raheem Mostert was the running back 2 overall on only 25 receptions. Derrick Henry himself was a running back 8 on only 28 receptions. We saw Montgomery finish 13th on 16 receptions. How for all 3? Touchdowns. And the thing that we talk about with receptions, right? For almost every running back, we look at this and be like, okay, if you're not involved in the receiving game, it's a little bit concerning because, there's less variance week to week with receptions, but with touchdowns, people can just get unlucky. You can have a season where someone has decent usage, but it's just very unlucky with touchdowns. And if you're not adding in those receptions, you're going to have a lot of disappointing weeks if you're also not scoring when you get into the end zone. But there's just like no world where Derrick Henry stays healthy and has a bad year for touchdowns. Like if he played 14 games this season, stayed mostly healthy, and he had 5 touchdowns, you'd be shocked. You'd be like, okay, did Lamar and their other backup quarterback both get injured? And then like they played an insane schedule and just like everything fell apart. They had receivers fall apart and they scored like 15 points a game. Like how did he only score 5 touchdowns? It's basically impossible. And because we know with an extremely high level of confidence that he will be amongst the league leaders in touchdowns, the lack of receptions doesn't hurt as much. And it's not like he's going to have 0 receptions. As long as he can approach 15 to 20 receptions, he should be fine. Last 2 years, he's been way higher than that. And especially when we consider that, you are getting a discount, right? In the 26 leagues that I drafted him in, my average pick for taking him was 33rd. Like that's a 309 in a 12-team league. Over the last 6 seasons, he's been 19th, 2nd, 5th, 1st, 3rd, and 16th in half PPR points per game. So a top 5 running back in 4 of the last 6 years, with the only 2 finishes where he was a running back 2 in points per game. That was when the Titans ranked 27th and 27th in points per game, when they ranked 29th and 31st in plays per game. We know Baltimore is going to be top 10 in both these categories. So I'm in no way saying, a 30-year-old Derrick Henry is just a lock to crush. If I was saying that, I'd rank him as a top 5 pick. I'm, of course, not ranking him as a top 5 pick. But we have no reason to believe that this is the year the cliff happens. If you look at the advanced underlying metrics for Derrick Henry, he was still great last season. Offensive line was just terrible. When you're being hit behind the line of scrimmage most plays, it's difficult to post insane numbers. And he was still very, very good last season. And if we think about you look at historical numbers, you're like, oh, well, age 30 is typically where we see drop-offs at running backs. Yeah, but Derrick Henry has proven time and time again, he's an outlier. He's a physical freak. You don't apply the typical age curves to outliers. We know for a fact that he's an outlier, and so it's just more likely that someone who's sustained this level of dominance this late in their career is going to continue doing so than someone who's been mediocre and happens to fall off at 30 because they weren't that good before. Most of our sample size of knowing that age 30 is a cliff, it's coming from running backs that honestly weren't that good even before. Very few running backs have 20 touchdowns in their range of outcomes, and I think that is 100% possible for Derrick Henry this season, and in no format do you actually have to take him as a first-round pick, so I think that makes him the ultimate hero. Usually, for a hero running back build, you kind of have to take a round 1 running back because you kind of get into round 2, round 3, and you're like, I don't feel great about this. Unless this guy really hits, I'm going to struggle here. There's a chance, again, my average pick for him is the 309. There's a chance you can wait longer than you usually can. Take him. If he has a 20 touchdown season, you're looking really good because you've been able to load up at other positions and not spend a first round pick on him. I think in redraft, you're obviously not getting him at 309. In redraft, I'm good with him any pick in round 2, as long as McCaffrey, Hall, Bijan, JT, Gibbs, and Saquon are off the board. I do think those 6 running backs should be drafted ahead of Derrick Henry, but once we exit that, you want to take Derrick Henry in round 2, absolutely fine. Again, anywhere in round 2, as long as those 6 are off the board, preferably half PPR and standard. He's still not as good in full PPR because we know for a fact the receptions won't be there. Still good taking him, but I would prefer it in half PPR. Running back 2, second most drafted running back, one that I'm a little bit more concerned about. I still think he's a rock solid pick, and we're getting a discount, so I can be more concerned. Best Josh Jacobs, I have him on 24 of my 129 teams. That is just over 18.5%. In his ADP, again, obviously later. If he was going to the same spot as Derrick Henry, I would not be drafting him, right? But he's going 53rd overall. That's the 504 on Underdog. In redraft, he's going to go closer to that 3-4 turn. So again, we're getting a good discount with him. So as many of you know, I really like the Packers offense this season. I think Jordan Love is a real deal. I just think with how many playmakers that they have, it also kind of makes them a very stable offense, right? For some of these really, really good offenses, you're like, okay, but they have this centerpiece of their team to where, if Justin Jefferson gets injured, you will see a very big drop off in the talent, in the output, I guess, for the Vikings offense. Same thing with Jamar Chase. You just assume they're going to have a lower ceiling. They're going to have a lower points per game average if he misses. When we think about especially this wide receiver core, this tight end core that the Packers have, they're so deep that it would take multiple injuries for them to really, really disappoint and not be a great offense. So I think not that they're a lock to be amazing. I think it's as close of a lock as you can get, that as long as Jordan Love stays healthy, there's basically no team where the quarterback gets hurt, you still have a great offense. But as long as Jordan Love stays healthy, they'd need so many injuries to not be a top, let's say not top 15, but I think they're going to be easily a top 10 offense this season. Wouldn't be shocked at all if they finished top 7. And my thought process for Jacobs is this is a player who we know is capable of 2,000 yards, happened 2 years ago. We know he's in the prime of his career. He's 26 years old. That's right in the range where you really want running backs for. We know that they're locked in on him, and they effectively gave him $14 million guaranteed this season. That is a very, very high number for running backs, so they've invested in him. And we know this offense has produced really high numbers for Aaron Jones, even late last season. I know Aaron Jones struggled last year because he was injured for most of the year. You look at the end of season numbers, not that great. But when he finally got healthy last year, he was awesome in this system. They're also going to be winning a ton of games. They're going to be scoring a ton of touchdowns. All of these great for running backs. everything screams bounce back for Josh Jacobs. And the only reason you don't have to take him in round 2 is because last season was so awful. But I mostly throw last season out. I mean, like, that was the only season of his career that he's been bad. And again, he's not old. He was 25 last year. There was just a lot going on for the Raiders last year, not only with the whole contract dispute, the holdout, but the offense was playing so poorly. Their quarterback got hurt. They had head coaching change, GM change. Like, everything was going wrong for that team. Situation couldn't possibly have improved more. Only thing standing in his way of not having like over 1,500 yards, over 12 touchdowns is Marshawn Lloyd, who I like. My model likes. A lot of people like. But he's, no guarantee to actually split the workload this season. No guarantee to actually play in the Aaron Jones role. But so many people and so many in this community have just crowned Marshawn Lloyd as the next Aaron Jones starting in week 1. They're like, yup, he's going to be in that role. It's like maybe, but honestly, it's probably the least likely outcome between that happening and not happening. Most likely outcome is that he's a rookie. He produces, he has some good games, but he's not someone that's going to just chuck in to a role that Aaron Jones himself had to earn throughout multiple years of his career. So again, I understand the concerns about last season. I understand the concerns about Lloyd, but that's why his ADP is so late. By taking him where he's going, all of that stuff is factored in. And I really think people are sleeping on this Packers offense. And Jacobs is such a fantastic way of gaining exposure to them, especially on Underdog. I have done some really, really cool builds where I use him as my hero. You usually can't get a early to mid 5th round running back as your hero. You're almost pushing into RB0 at that point. But I've done some builds where I say, okay, maybe he has 1,500 yards, 15 touchdowns with receptions this season. Let's pretend I effectively paid a 1st or 2nd round pick for him, but I'm going to draft 3 straight wide receivers. I'm then going to draft Allen or Mahomes or Jalen Hurts. Then I'm going to grab Jacobs. And if he has that sort of season, I don't even need to keep going at running back in the middle rounds. Maybe I can keep going at wide receiver. I could double dip at elite quarterback, elite tight end. I can do a bunch of different really unique things. And then if he hits, the upside of that roster is incredible. And if he doesn't hit, well, I'm rooting for first place anyways. It's obviously going to be more difficult, but it's okay to miss on a 5th round running back because we've seen the huge historical drop off into the 5th round. I love this team. I love Jacobs. I think it's a great way to gain exposure to them. Third most rostered running back is Saquon Barkley. And I promise we're going to hit on 2 later round, or I guess like a mid to late round and then a really late round running back with the next 2. But another earlier round one, I have Barkley on 20 of my 129 teams. That's about 15.5%. And I guess I never mentioned before, but when I'm talking about these exact exposure, I say 15.5% of my teams I've drafted him. If you just envision what would average be, that would you'd be taking 1 out of 12, right? You'd be saying I have 8.3% exposure to everyone. So if you just went by ADP, you never took a stand on any player, and you drafted exactly by ADP all the way to the end, you'd have about 8.3% exposure to everyone. So if I have 15.5%, I'm saying I'm taking Saquon close, a little bit under, twice as often as average. So why? Why have I done that? Well, because he's going to be a featured back on the Eagles and is a player that even on the Giants last 2 years, he's averaged just under 100 yards per game, 3.3 receptions per game. He's going to get goal line usage, receptions, and yardage. He's going to hit in every single area. Yes, I know they like Kenneth Gainwell. I know they've talked very positively about Will Shipley in the receiving game. We need to be honest with ourselves. Yes, these coaches are talking these players up. No running back was given more guaranteed money at signing than Saquon Barkley. Eagles gave him $26 million guaranteed to a running back that is not young. I mean, he's not old, obviously. He's 27 years old. But it wasn't, a 24, 25-year-old running back. That's a ton of money in today's NFL to guarantee a running back. They're not breaking the bank for Saquon and then giving their late 4th round rookie a massive role. And that's why, he's not that good. So Saquon's going to be featured this season on a team that's projected to finish 6th in points per game, top 5 in plays. People's biggest concern is saying, okay, sure, he's featured, but the rushing touchdowns. Jalen Hurts is going to steal a ton of rushing touchdowns, had 15 last season. I 1,000% agree this is a concern, but it's the same thing I've talked about these other picks. It's like, that's why Saquon's not a top 3 pick. That is factored in to his ADP. If Jalen Hurts was going to run for 3 touchdowns this season, we'd be projecting Saquon for like 25 touchdowns. We'd probably project him for like upper teens, but like he'd be a lock to have a ton of touchdowns. He'd go along with, 40, 45 receptions. You'd be taking him right after, Christian McCaffrey. So yes, the touchdown ceiling is capped, but Eagles running backs scored 7 last season, 7 rushing touchdowns. I have him projected to score 8.5 rushing touchdowns, 2.8 through the air. That seems more than fair. With that projection, he grades out as an exceptional pick. So you don't need him to have 15 touchdowns. If he does, he's going to shatter his ADP. But it's totally fine if he goes out there, he has like 8, 9 touchdowns, 2 or 3 through the air. That would make him a solid pick, given how many yards, how many receptions we also expect him to have. And I've taken him on average with pick 20. So I love having a draft where I pair him with, a top 5 wide receiver, or I go running back. I don't have to worry about that position for a ton of rounds. I mean, probably like 7 or 8 rounds after that, you're going to have to touch it. I know that all these 3 running backs I've talked about so far, Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley, I know they all have some level of concern, some level of unknown. Number one, that's why they're not going in round 1. But we need to recognize the situation upgrade that these 3 are making this season. I truly believe that all have at least 1 year of elite production left in them, and they're transitioning from offenses that were all ranked bottom 8 in touchdowns per game last season to clear top 10 offenses in my eyes, and they're all going to be winning far more often as well. That's a huge boost for running back production as well, especially for someone like Derrick Henry, who averages 22.5 points per game in wins, 12.3 points per game in losses. For the other 2, it's not going to be as extreme as it will be for Derrick Henry, but the point will always remain: running backs on winning teams produce more fantasy points. When you are winning, the running backs do better. It is not the reverse. So really, really like all those 3. 4th most rostered running back, a little bit later in drafts now, Tyjae Spears. I've drafted Spears on 19 of my 129 teams. That is just under 15%. And I've taken him on average with pick 111. That is the early 10th round. I've made it no secret that I think Spears is better than Tony Pollard. And I think, it's most notable in the receiving game, but with how pass heavy the Titans are going to be, that is extremely important. Spears was 9th among running backs with 71 targets last season, despite playing behind Derrick Henry on an offense that was last in pass attempts per game. Pollard ran the 3rd most routes of any running back last season with 362. It was 109 more routes than Tyjae Spears, yet Spears commanded 1 more target, again on 109 fewer routes, while also being significantly more efficient with those targets. Spears was also better on the ground. He averaged 0.3 more true yards per carry. He was much more explosive. He was 5th in breakaway run rate. Pollard was 25th. We've also been told a million times that they're viewed interchangeably by the coaches, and if one's going to get more touches, it's going to be hot hand. It's going to be one of them is producing a lot better, and they roll with that running back. I just think Spears is more likely to be that hot hand, and if he's going to go around later in drafts, seems like a no-brainer to me. Even if you thought they were 50-50, take the one going around later. If I think he's better, obviously I'll take it also at a discount. Then finally, 5th most rostered running back is a later round flyer, and that's Audric Estime. He's the Broncos' 5th round rookie running back this season. I've taken him on average with pick 200. So, it's not like we're reaching super far here. We're not drafting him in the early rounds. Pick 200. You're not giving up that much draft capital to get him. The expectation right now is that Estime and Williams are going to kind of split that early down workload, with McLaughlin really mixing in on passing downs, really taking a stronghold in that area. That's going to make for a super gross situation on a bottom 5 offense to start. Like, I promise you, People are going to be frustrated with this Broncos running back room if they're actually going to rotate all three of these backs and they're going to be as bad as people are kind of expecting them to be this season. That's not going to result in probably any of them being very good picks, any of them being players you want to start in fantasy. But we're at pick 200. Do we really think the running backs are going to be clear fantasy starters in week 1 at pick 200? Of course not. I'm thinking about the ceiling with this pick. I'm not convinced that Sean Payton actually really likes Javonte Williams. I think he wants him to get back to what he kind of looked like in college, but if he can't really do that, I think there's a strong possibility he could get traded. I don't think he's getting cut this season. He's way too much value for him to actually cut him, but he could be traded away to a team that really wants a running back right now or one that has an injury in the future. But whether it's through that happening or an injury to Javonte Williams, if Estime can get that lead role on the ground, never going to be used heavily in the receiving game, but if he can get that role on the ground, he's going to have a lead upside. Sean Payton coached teams have ranked top 6 in running back fantasy points per game in 10 of 12 seasons. They have ranked top 2 in running back points per game in 9 of 12 seasons. Sean Payton offenses are extremely running back friendly. So if there's a chance that Estime is leading this team in touches at any point in the season, and he's only going to cost you a pick at 200, it's absolutely worth taking a shot on. Also, it's not just a shot in the dark. I'm not saying oh, maybe Estime is good. My model really liked Audric Estime. It thinks that the Broncos got a steal. It projected him as the 5th best prospect, right behind Blake Corum, right ahead of Jalen Wright. Also, it's great seeing that Sean Payton clearly loves him, the way he talks about him, talks about other players in the media, everything is just he clearly really likes Estime. He's mentioned many times how he was someone that when they went through the pre-draft process, they were we got to try and find a way to get this kid onto the team. The front office really likes him. They think they stole him in the draft. So he could be a true league winner if the team really gets behind him. If something happens to Javonte Williams or he's not on the team or he's injured, he's going to get a ton of touches, very, very high upside. And again, not going to cost you anything other than your last pick in draft. So those are my 5 most rostered running backs after 129 drafts. We have finally hit August. August is draft season. The normies are finally showing up to draft. So you're going to start being in more lobbies where people haven't paid too much attention during the off season. So get in on the fun. Sign up for Underdog today. You can join drafts instantly for as little as $3. And the best part, if you sign up today using promo code FFA, make at least a $10 deposit, you're going to get my Underdog and redraft rankings for free. They'll be emailed to you the following morning. So not only can you enter drafts right now, not only will they give you a deposit bonus on your deposit, but you'll also get my rankings for free. So if you watched this far, be sure to leave a like, really helps me out. And if you're new here, hit the subscribe button as well so you don't miss out on any free content. I'll be back tomorrow with 3 players to break down. That, my friends, is the end of this one, and thanks for watching.